Welcome to the G5 Hive and our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive to the G5 college football landscapes with the folks that know the teams the best. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review. Today, we'll be heading over to the Sun Belt Conference to take a look at the Louisiana Ragin Cajuns, who finished 10-4 in 2024 and capped off their season with an appearance in the New Mexico Bowl. They wrapped up their 2025 spring practice with their vermilion and white spring game on May 3rd. We have a special guest joining us today. He is the host for the Lowdown for ESPN Southwest Louisiana. He is a Ragin Cajun and Seminole alum. He does play-by-play for Ragin Cajuns women's basketball. He is a sideline reporter for the Ragin Cajuns football. He is Dawson Eiserloh. Dawson can be found on X at Eiserloh Dawson. Welcome to the show, Dawson.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me. I love doing this type of stuff, so excited to get into it.
Well, before we get into the football aspect of it, before those who are just turning into the G5 Hive for the first time, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been covering Louisiana football?
Yeah, so just kind of grew up in and around sports, went to school at UL first, and then Florida State for my master's in sport management. And from there, started to get into the radio business kind of by accident, and am now show host, started doing broadcasting work, which is kind of what I really enjoy. Got back on with the program with the women's basketball team. And then last year was my first year doing sideline reporting for football. So I've been really enjoying it. And yeah, just love talking ball.
Well, let's move over and talk some Ragin Cajun football. For those not familiar with their offensive style, how would you describe it?
Yeah, so Coach Des, who's been in place, took over for Billy Napier a few years back. His offense, it kind of builds on a lot of that stuff. I'd say run first. I think that's kind of generic. A lot of pistol sets as far as what the offense is going to look like. They're going to utilize motion. They like to kind of hide their formations a little bit. But at the crux of it, it's power running game. It's setting it up with play action and getting the ball out into the receiver's hands. He has done a good job, I think, of kind of adapting to the talent that his team's had in, year by year. I think last year's probably the best example of that. So, multiple could probably also be a good way to describe him.
Well, let's get to the position where it all starts on offense. That's the quarterback. Last season, the Ragin Cajuns were crushing it with Ben Wooldridge at the helm. However, Ben would suffer a broken collarbone in Week 10 against South Alabama, and Chandler Fields would take over. Chandler Fields and first-team all-conference quarterback and Sun Belt Offense Player of the Year, Ben Wooldridge, have graduated, while Daniel Beal and Dwayne Winfield return. Plus, the staff brought in Walker Howard from Ole Miss. How did this room look in the spring?
Yeah, so look, last year, just to backtrack a little bit, was such a weird season. We didn't really think Ben or Chandler was going to be back, and then all of a sudden they were both back. And so, they both battled it out again. It felt like the same script over and over again. Ben plays great. Ben gets hurt. Chandler comes in. He plays pretty well. He gets hurt too. So really just unfortunate the way those careers ended. But also kind of, it was a blessing that they both decided to come back last year. So you fast forward it. Daniel Beal, they've been high on for a long time. He was a true freshman last year. He played at Catholic of Baton Rouge, highly touted prospect out of high school. Saw it. Unfortunately for the Cajuns, he had to play a little bit in the Sun Belt Championship game. They would have preferred for him not to. He wasn't really ready for that moment. But he's definitely a factor in that room. Lunch Winfield, Dwayne Winfield, they call him Lunch. He's a guy, he's probably the most athletic of the three. He was also hurt most of last year. He actually came back and played in the bowl game. It was the only game he played in. They used him in kind of a little bit of a wildcat package. They do love the skill set, though. They love the talent. Another guy really, really accomplished in high school. And then Walker Howard. He's kind of the main event here. They brought him in out of the transfer portal. He started his career at LSU, then went to Ole Miss, played for Lane Kiffin. Didn't really work out. Kind of got caught behind Jackson Dart there at the end. The guy was a 5-star prospect in high school. He's from the Lafayette area, hometown kid. It just hasn't happened yet for him in college. And so he's kind of that modern billboard for the transfer portal and the opportunities it can provide you. So there was no doubt a lot of buzz when he was brought in. And I think we saw a little bit of that in the spring. But, Coach Des is old school. He's not going to come out and hand a job to somebody in July. unless they've really kind of taken it. So as of now, they're calling this a quarterback competition as they head to the fall.
Well, Dawson, from what you've been able to witness and hear, who do you think has the leg up for that number one quarterback position right now?
Yeah, after I gave you kind of like the long politically correct answer, I'd also say you don't bring in a guy like Walker Howard without the idea of him playing. I mean, he's a high profile prospect for a reason. The talent, the ceiling's probably the highest as well. And he's actually the most experienced, at least by years in college, right? He's been around a little bit. Daniel Beal going into his second year, Lunch Winfield just his third. I think Walker has, every opportunity to get this starting job. I would say it's his to lose. But at the end of the day, we really thought, last year it was unique because Chandler decided to come back when there was some real rumors that maybe he could go down, try and play at the FCS level, or he could just move on, graduate and move to the real world. And when he came back, a few of us assumed okay, he must have come back with the idea that it was his job, and then it wasn't. So clearly Coach Des is not worried about what's politically, he's not going to hand anybody a job because of circumstances. So I think it's Walker's opportunity, but he's got to go take it.
And you talked about Howard being kind of like the poster boy of this transfer portal. How would you describe his play for those not familiar?
Yeah, he's a dual threat guy. I think that's the other thing. What's unique about Walker is there's such limited film on him in college. We're kind of trying to go back and, I went back and watched his highlights at STM, which is the high school he played at around here. They're a powerhouse. He was known for his ability to get outside the pocket and create. He's got a big arm. He can kind of make all the throws, the eye candy throws. But at the same time, I guess we're trying to kind of figure out where's he changed or grown in the last 3-4 years in college, because we haven't seen Walker Howard play for more than, a half or a game here or there. We don't have a sample size of him getting 6-7 games in as a starter. So in a lot of ways, I guess we're still going to try and kind of figure out who he is as a quarterback.
And what are the expectations around Howard or whoever happens to win this quarterback one position there around Lafayette?
Yeah, I think it's a unique season, and the expectations are high overall for the team. Don't get me wrong. They make an appearance in the Sun Belt Championship game. They lose that. They lose the bowl. They do bring back a lot of talent, but not all of it. They certainly lost some key pieces. So I think overall they're also opening a new stadium, which you guys had some clips of it in the intro. So there's a lot of buzz and excitement about the team as a whole. The interesting thing for me, and listening to Coach Des talk in the post-spring presser a couple times, they asked the quarterback position to do more last year because they knew they had fifth-year adults playing the position, right? It sounds like, at least at first, they know they can't ask the same of Walker Howard or Daniel Beal or Lunch Winfield that they asked of Ben Woolridge and then even Chandler Fields. So I think what's asked of them is actually going to be lessened, and maybe they lean on that run game a little more. They're at their best when they're running the football. So the expectations of who's going to come out of there, they're going to be high, but I think the coaching staff is smart enough to know that they can't be unrealistic when what they ask that player to do.
And when you were talking about Beal and Winfield, if you had to guess who would be that number two, if Howard's number one, who do you think has a leg up there for number two?
Probably Beal, because I actually think Winfield has a chance to be used in some other roles. They tried it out in the bowl game. They put him on the field in different spots. They let him run a couple snaps at Wildcat quarterback. He's the best athlete probably of the three. Now, he's still a quarterback. It's not like they're changing his position, but I could see a scenario where, if it is Howard, then Beal ends up being the full-time backup, but Winfield has a role on the offense, kind of being a joker, a Taysom Hill type thing that we've seen with the Saints. I think that's the most likely scenario of how each one of them kind of accept the role they're given.
And you talked about Winfield's game and Howard's, but how about Beal and being that, if he's that backup, those not familiar with his play style, how would you describe it?
Yeah, probably the most pocket passer of the three. Doesn't quite move around as much, but I think is a decent athlete, can at least get out and extend plays. I actually watched him. I was covering state championships when he played in them. Saw him play in the Superdome. And, first of all, he had a loaded team. They were really, really good that year, and they won the championship. But his kind of ability to make reads down the field impressed me at the time because he was a high school senior. So I think that kind of the strength Beal has is that processing ability, and everybody's raved about it. It didn't show up in game last year when he got thrown in, but also, I mean, he got thrown into the second half of a conference championship game and they were down 3 touchdowns. So I kind of give him a pass on that. But I really do think there's kind of a different element to Beal that we're waiting to see too. And he's still got a lot of developing to do.
Well, moving on to the running game, Louisiana deployed a running back by committee approach there in 2024, utilizing Bill Davis, Silent Perry, and Draylon Washington. Washington has now transferred off to Alabama, while both Perry and Davis return in 2025. How did the running backs look in the spring?
It's got to be the strength of this offense if they're going to be really successful, in my opinion, at least. Bill Davis, Silent Perry were kind of the 2 top lead backs. It's interesting, like Draylon Washington kind of lost some carries as the year went on, entered the portal, but then landed at Alabama. So, kind of a step up there, which was a little bit surprising to some of us, to be honest with you. But Bill Davis is a guy who's really, really talented. He's really, this kind of small bowling ball style back, but he's got some shiftiness. He can also run in between the tackles. Zylan Perry, a little more of the home run hitter. They've used him as a kick returner in the past. He's got that lightning quick speed. His problem at times has been kind of staying out there, staying healthy. Last year was better in that he stayed mostly healthy. But I think at their best, it's a Thunder and Lightning tandem. There's a couple freshmen. There's some other guys that people are excited about and maybe some that are coming along. But I think it starts with Bill Davis and Zylan Perry. And it's, probably the most experience and production they have in any individual position group.
So, I mean, like last year, they used the 3 backs. You think this year is supposed to just going to be those 2, at least early on, I assume?
I think that comes down to how much they get trusted by both Dez and offense coordinator Tim Leger. It's interesting, like last year down the stretch, they had a week, I remember, where they were really banged up. And we kind of asked Coach, we were like, look, if whoever it was, I think it was Zylan Perry who was questionable. We were like, if he doesn't play, and they had gone down the list. I think Washington was out, Perry was out. We were like, who's left? Like, who do you trust the most? And basically the answer we were given was like, nobody. Like it's the guys we told you about are the ones that would play. So trust matters to them. And I think there's an opportunity for a third back to come in there, but if they don't fully trust them, then they'll go with the 2.
It's here in early July, but if you had to guess, who do you think gets that first running back carry against Rice?
Yeah, I'll go Bill Davis. I think just the most he's your standard. If you had to pick a 3-down back out of him, he's the one. It could be Zylan Perry. I guarantee it's going to be matchup based, right? They love coming out with their little scripted drives and the ways they start games. But your best bet there is probably Bill Davis.
Well, let's turn our attention over to the wide receivers. This room loses 3 of their top 4 wideouts from 2024. The trio of Lance Lejean, Harvey Broussard, and Jacob Bernard accounted for 163 targets, 1,682 yards, and 9 touchdowns. That means there's a lot of opportunity here for this group in 2025. Their top receiver who returns in 2025 is Robert Williams, and he demanded a 16% target share in 2024. What are the expectations for this wide receiving room heading into the season?
Yeah, the big question mark, right? Which it's kind of been a question mark for a number of years in a row, interestingly enough. And so I think this year, maybe even there's a little more confidence than there's been in the past. They went through this cycle where Michael Jefferson was the number 1 a handful of years ago. He had a huge year. Was supposed to be an NFL draft pick. Actually had a really tragic accident there before the draft. And then past that, it was like every year the question was, all right, who's going to step up and be the number 1 guy? Last year they had it. It was Lance Lejean. He's a guy who was on QB1. Like many people know him from that TV show. He was a quarterback at Maryland. He came over. He had some legal issues, missed the previous season, then came back and had really a breakout year for them. Now you go, okay, it's time to ask that same question again. Harvey Broussard transfers out. Rob Williams, I think, is a reliable target. I think they're going to trust him. They'll throw to him often. I don't know if he's number 1 material, but Shelton Sampson feels like that's who that is. Transfer they brought in from LSU. You talk about the spring earlier. He kind of had everybody buzzing. He went up, made kind of this highlight reel catch in the corner of the end zone in the spring game from Walker Howard. There's a relationship there that's pre-existing. The skill set and the talent, I talked to a couple people who knew him a little bit or covered him a little bit, I should say, when he was at LSU. It sounded like the problem was just kind of him adjusting to college, staying locked in, understanding, going every day, grinding it out. If he's figured that stuff out, like the talent is just nasty. Like he's got a chance to be a legit number 1 receiver. if it's not him, I guess the question you asked me who it would be, and that's a good one. I don't know. There's a couple guys. Raji Dennis is a track star in high school that they've always really liked, but has he developed the route running, the receiver skills? We'll have to wait and see. But I think if I'm making a pick for the number one receiver on this team, it's got to be the transfer Shelton Sampson.
Well, I mentioned earlier there's 163 targets that are vacant here in 2024. How do you see those targets getting divided up with the unknowns in this room? Going to one guy, spread the love? Did Walker kind of like target one guy in the spring a lot?
Yeah, I mean, I probably not a big enough sample size to know, but I would guess spreading it out. That's, the only time this Cajuns offense with Michael Decimo, either as a head coach or even going back to his days at the offense coordinator, there was one year where they really had one big time focused star receiver. And that was the year they had Michael Jefferson. I think that kind of was more of just Jefferson as opposed to what Dez likes to do. I think they're going to spread it around. The other thing, and I know you'll ask me about it too, like Terrence Carter moved on. He transferred to Texas Tech. He was probably the most talented player in that receiving tight end room last year, and he got a bunch of those targets. So I know they like the guys they brought in, but that's also a big void. So I wonder, I think they're going to spread stuff around, but maybe there ends up being a connection between Howard and Sampson. That's the one we saw glimpses of in the spring. If there's going to be a real connection, it's between those two guys who I understand knew each other a little bit before linking up here at UL.
Well, you mentioned it earlier. Let's move over to that tight end room. For someone that's never caught a Ragin Cajuns game, how would you describe how the tight ends are utilized in the offense?
Yeah, it's funny. There's a lot of Cajun fans that would like them to utilize them more. Throw it to the tight end is kind of a little bit of a hashtag that the Cajun fans like to talk about. But historically, it's been pretty good. Ladarius Green is a great tight end for them. Went on to play in the NFL for the Chargers. Terrence Carter last year, I really mean this, one of the most talented, fun to watch tight ends I've ever watched play the game. Undersized as far as a typical tight end, but just, so athletic. The ability, he made this catch against Coastal, basically won the game for him. It was this big, long touchdown up the right sideline. He was special. And, I think it really took until last year and maybe the second half of the season when they kind of figured out how the best utilize him. So it sucks on one hand, now you're kind of resetting with that. But the tight end position, it matters a lot because they're going to run a lot of two tight end sets. They like getting the tight ends in the running game. You've got to be able to block if you're going to play that position. But at the same time, it's a nice bonus if you can throw them 30, 35 passes a year too.
In the spring, was there anyone that kind of stood out or anyone that, obviously it's a tall order to ask someone to be a first team all conference tight end, but is there anyone that you can see can kind of help fill that void left by Carter? Yeah,
the interesting thing too, Ty Stamby was another tight end that started. He was a freshman they really liked last year, played a good bit. He actually transferred out as well. So Caden Jensen's the guy who's left in the room. He's the one who's still there. He's probably a better blocker than he is pass catcher, but he is reliable. He catches the ball that's thrown to him. He's not a super athlete, but they'll rely on him and he'll play a lot. They went out in the transfer portal. They got Brock Chappell, who is a player that I think we're still waiting to see. I think in the spring, too, a lot of those acquisitions, some of the transfers we probably didn't see the best of because they were kind of still getting acclimated. But I know they're high on Chappell. I know Jensen's going to play a bunch. But I do think, look, they've got a guy, Teddy Golick was a walk-on who earned a scholarship this offseason. So does that, mean maybe he's in line for some more opportunities? There are definitely some reps to be taken, and some of these tight ends are going to find him.
Well, the offensive line looks to fill holes at center and left guard here in 2025. Now, these are not normal holes at left guard, as A.J. Gilly and center Landon Burton were first-team all-conference selections in 2024. Now, this right side of the line should be fantastic heading into 2025 as it's anchored by Jax Harrington at right guard and then George Jackson at right tackle. Dawson, how did this group look in the spring?
Yeah, the O-line is, again, it's probably got to be one of the strengths if they're going to do what they want to. The Cajuns do something a little bit unique. They play 7-8 linemen at times. Like last year, even when they were healthy, they do like to rotate. I know, a handful of teams do that, but Jax Harrington's the one. They weren't, I don't know, midway, 3/4 through the season last year. I thought it was his last year. We started to hear these rumblings around the bowl game time, hey, Jax might have another year and he might be interested in using it. And ultimately he decided to come back. So that's big for them. He's played what feels like 100 college football games And so to have him back at guard is really solid. But they do really like the young guys in the room. And you mentioned George Jackson. Like, the issue with George has been staying healthy. If he's able to do that, then there's, pretty good feeling about him on the right side. Cooper Fordham at the center position played a good bit as a young player. They feel like maybe he could take the next step. The Cajuns' offensive line has been the strength of the team for a while now. They've put more guys into the NFL from that position group than anyone else. They've got 4 or 5 of them on NFL rosters right now. So it's kind of been, hey, we'll figure it out when we lose really good linemen, and 2025 is kind of the next iteration of that. They're hoping that the group that's stepping up is ready for the show.
Who does this room look to as like the leader of that offensive line?
Yeah, that's Jax Harrington. And actually just got announced too. He's going to be headed over to Sunbelt Media Days, representing the team. He's a 5th-year senior. He's been a starter like almost from the beginning. So I think they just really value that. And he's also a tough guy, like numerous injuries that he's had that I've, that we've both heard about. And then like, hey, rumors, hey, by the way, Jax was banged up. He was playing through it. Like, he's a warrior. And I don't think there's any doubt he's a leader of that offensive line, especially after a year like last year where AJ Gilly kind of gets to pass the torch, I think, to Jax.
And it looked like that the staff didn't bring in very many transfers, if any. So I assume that means that the staff likes what they have in the room. They like the depth. Who's a name in this room that you're looking to take that kind of proverbial jump from 2024 to 2025?
Yeah, to the first part of what you said there, I think you're right. I think the offensive line is kind of, like I said before, maybe the most confident group that the Cajuns feel like they can develop. They've turned 2- and 3-star players into NFL prospects and NFL starters multiple times. So they feel really good about it. Look, I'll give you a name. Mackie Malo is a guy who he's always had the physical abilities. He's 6'9", 340 pounds. Like, he's literally a giant among human beings. He kind of, he was really candid with us. We had a media session with him last year where he talked about just kind of, again, as I talked about earlier with some of their other transfers, like adjusting to college wasn't easy for him. He kind of let, the weight room and the practice room slack off a little bit. He's been around a long time. And it's kind of one of those this year things. Like, if it's ever going to happen, it's got to happen now. So the talent's always been crazy. The guy is literally a giant. If he puts it together, Mackie Malo could be really good. I don't know if that's going to be, last year they used him as kind of an extra lineman, like bring him in a real heavy package. It might take an injury or two for him to get a chance, but I'd be really fascinated to see what he did with it if he got the opportunity.
Dawson, if you had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season in 2025, who you got?
It's funny, like you say the word breakout. I think almost anybody could qualify in that category for this team. I would have to say Shelton Sampson, just because the talent's just too undeniable, right? And he hasn't done it at the college level, so I think it still counts as breakout, even though, he's a pretty highly touted prospect at a high school. It's, there's a player, and you look at the spring practices, if there was one guy, and we didn't get to see a ton of them from a media standpoint, but if there was one guy that kind of jumped out off the page to you, it was Sampson. So I would like to say, again, if I'm going with the theme of the quarterbacks not being asked to do too much, maybe he gets some help from his talented receiver.
Well, let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. Dawson, for those not familiar with Louisiana's defensive style, how would you describe it and kind of the scheme that they run there?
Yeah, a little bit new last year. Got in a new first-year defensive coordinator, and they kind of changed some things that they were doing. I think they're going to be – I use the phrase multiple. I think it's kind of vague, but they do like to kind of vary up their fronts. What they did a little bit last year in the first year under a new coach is kind of go back to a little bit more 4-man fronts. They had run a lot of 3-3-5 stuff in the past. But I will say this, another thing they do defensively that's a little unique is they play a lot of guys. And, the idea from last year to this year, they lost a lot of the starters, the first guys on the depth chart, but almost everybody who's in line to start this year played a lot last year. So that's kind of Coach Dez's approach, right? A lot of guys, and it, part of it, I'm sure, is like roster retention, wanting to keep guys in the program, keep guys excited. He plays a lot more than 11 guys. And this year, what he did in the past couple years might really pay off for them.
Well, let's take a look at these defensive position groups and start with the guys up front along that defensive line. This room will look to replace some pieces on the interior of this line as they look to replace Mason Narcisse and Kyron Mims. However, fans can be excited to see Cam Whitfield and Jordan Lawson make life miserable for opposing quarterbacks off the edge. The duo will look to build on their 64 pressures and 11 sacks in 2024. Dawson, what are the expectations for this defensive line as we head into 2025?
Yeah, to start it off, they got another situation that was pretty similar to Jax Harrington, Kadarius Miller. They kind of had thought he was done, and then all of a sudden they were like, well, he's got that one extra year left. You want to go ahead and use it? And he did. So they get him back. That's going to be a nice boost for him. Honestly, though, to kind of go back to what we said, when they didn't add any transfers in the offensive line room, they did add a couple on the defensive side. I think it was a weakness last year. Like, they gave up too many big gashing runs that kind of started with a lack of penetration on the interior. So I think they've tried to address that. You mentioned Cam Whitfield. He's one of the most talented pass rushers in the Sun Belt. He's just, and they had some stuff in the previous scheme. They didn't really feel like they were utilizing him fully correctly. So that's another thing they worked on last year with a new DC. If he takes the next step, like it's felt for me for a long time, like Cam Whitfield had a chance to break out and be, I don't want to use Mike Green category of last year at Marshall, who went on, was a first round draft pick because of what he did. But like the talent's freaky for Cam Whitfield. So they're expecting a lot from him. And Jordan Lawson is going to be the rock of that D-line. They're going to look to him, I think, kind of similarly to what Jax Harrington is on the O-line. Been here a long time and had a really good second half of the season last year. So if he builds on that, they've got a mix of experience. They brought in a guy like Jalen Kreider as a transfer. I don't know how many of these guys will factor in. And also Fitzgerald West, who played last year, then got hurt. He was an LSU transfer who kind of gave him a boost. So there's a lot of names, but they've got to be better up front against the run if they're going to have, the type of success they want to have.
You mentioned, getting back Kadarius Miller. Is there anyone else you kind of feel like is ready to step up next to him on that interior and kind of shore up that the defensive tackle spot?
Yeah, a little bit of the unknown with some of those guys they brought in, right? With the transfer situation, Jalen Kreider's, who I reference as a grad transfer guy, so there's a chance there. Lance Williams, we've kind of heard a lot about throughout his career, hasn't quite done it yet on the big stage, so you wonder about him. But really, I think too, it's going to have to be kind of a collective effort there, right? I don't know if they have like a superstar player. Like a few years back, they had a guy named Zion Hill, who's just kind of a game wrecker, and it made up for a lot of the stuff that they maybe struggle with. I don't know if they have that player on this roster, and so I think it's probably got to be a collective effort up front.
Who do you feel is the key to success for this defensive line in 2025?
Got to be Cam Whitfield. Like I said before, they've gotten it from him in spurts, and they've had moments where he's kind of taken over a game here and there. And I remember too, like when they brought in, the new staff, there was, Cam Whitfield was one of the guys that were like, we're going to use him in a lot of different ways. We're going to try and, find different things to get him going. It did and it didn't happen last year, right? Like there were some moments again where you're like, all right, there he is. If you get a consistent 12 games out of Cam Whitfield, he could put up monster numbers. I think they've got to have that at this point.
Well, the linebacking group are look to replace the duo of Carmika Glass and KC Osai in 2025. Glass is off to Houston, and first-team all-conference linebacker Osai has graduated. The room returns the likes of Jaden Duggar, Terrence Williams, Caleb Caboti, among others. Did anyone stand out to you in the spring?
Yeah, biggest question for me on the defense, hands down, is KCSI's replacement. Was not only the leader of the defense on the field, was a leader off the field, was, represented the team at media days, like was no doubt like the heart and soul of that defense. And he was also one of those guys who's pretty vocal about getting guys into place, like the quarterback of the defense, I think gets overused. He was absolutely that. So 100%, they've got to figure that out. And then to make it maybe even a little worse, the most easy replacement would have been Carmika Glass right next to him, who played alongside him for most of the year. He hops in the portal, so now you got to replace that as well. I will say this, Terrence Williams is a player who was a running back for the first couple of years he was at UL. They flipped him over last spring, said, let's try it out on the defensive side. They were raving about what he did last spring. Going into the fall, they were like, this guy has just unbelievable, natural on the defensive side. And then he didn't play that much. He was behind Glass and Osai, but they never stopped talking about how much they liked him. he's going to have to do it this year, right? There's no one else left in front of him. Caleb Cabote, another one. He played last year. He was part of that rotation of guys that would come in. But there were a few games where Osai, he never missed a full game, but there were some moments where he would come out for a few plays with an injury, something like that. It seemed like the defense struggled every time Osai was out. So they've got to find it. I don't know if it's a combination of those two. I would imagine it's got to be Cabote and Terrence Williams. Start with them. But they do have some other guys who have, a little bit of playing experience. I don't know. That's the one I keep going. I just don't know where they're going to find the amount of production they got from Osai last season.
With Glass off to Houston, it's hard to replace first team all conference linebacker in Osai. Let's just say there's not a huge production drop off in this room. Who are those key pieces that this team's going to lean on?
I'll go right back to Terrence Williams. I know I just mentioned him, but like some of the things that were being said about him after last spring, I've got a friend of mine who we cover the team together. Like we were like, are they serious about this guy? Like they were talking like, man, one of the most talented linebackers we've ever watched. Now, sometimes this was coaches from the offensive side of the football. And I always think that's funny. Like those guys love hyping up the other side of the ball because I guess maybe they're not responsible for him if it doesn't work out right. But they really raved about his natural ability and like the instincts he has as a linebacker. So my feeling is, especially like to kind of use that logic, Luke, I'm stealing it from you. Like they didn't address it in the portal too much. So that tells me they felt pretty good about what they had. So I think Terrence Williams will have taken a massive leap if by the end of the year, we're not talking about that as a problem on this team.
Let's move over to the secondary. And in terms of snaps, this room loses their top 4 defenders. 3 of those losses were cornerbacks. This 2025 room looks to be in pretty good shape in the safeties, though. The cornerbacks kind of look green beyond Lorenzo Dubose. What should we expect from this defensive backfield here in 2025?
Yeah, similar to Osai. I think it's just so tough. Like Keon Martin was a legitimate shutdown option for them last year. You really didn't have to worry about most teams' top receiving target while he was out there. I thought he was really, really fun to watch play too. Just so, instinctual, I think is a term I would use about Keon Martin. So, Dubose is one of the highest rated prospects they brought in all time based on like the 247 or the Rivals composite, whatever it is. So the talent's always been there. He did start to get some playing time last year. They also used Avery Demery some, and he's probably going to step into a bigger role. They did address it in the portal a little bit. Trey Tomlinson comes in as a guy who's got a little bit of playing experience that they might use. But it's definitely one of those, from the spring, like didn't really know. A lot of guys were still kind of getting their feet wet. It's going to be interesting to see who lines up there first, I would say, right? But Dubose definitely has what we would feel like is an inside track to being one of their starters.
Is there a transfer in the secondary that you think, might make an instant impact for the Ragin Cajuns here in 2025?
Yeah, it could be Tomlinson that I just mentioned. But outside of that, I think the safety spot's probably going to be more about the returnees. Tyree Skipper was really, really good last year, and then he went down with an ACL injury, missed the back half of the season. He's back. He's another one of those representatives that's going to be with them at Sunbelt Media Days. So it seems like he's taken on more of a leadership role. But if he's back to where he was at before, Jalen Clark's a guy who's never quite put it together, but he's got an opportunity now. And, it's probably, again, like I said, the Tyrone Lewis was another one who was kind of one of the heart and soul guys on the defense last year. So you lose him, but Skipper and Lewis played so well together. I wonder if Skipper can kind of step up and take over some of the stuff that you're going to lose with Lewis being gone.
Speaking of Skipper, like you said, they really kind of formed a dynamic duo when they were both back there. Like both of them, in my opinion, had first team all conference potential in years. But, with Tyree Skipper coming back, what are the expectations for him in 2025?
Really big, really big. The only question for me is how the knee holds up, and ACL injuries. Now it's not even the top concern, right? Now you're more worried about guys with Achilles injuries from what it seems like in recent years. But if he's fully back and the knee's not a problem, then the expectations, I think, are that he's close to an all-conference performer for them. Like they're going to need it because of what we said, with some of the guys that have departed. I really pay attention. I know I've already mentioned it like 3 or 4 times. who Coach Des decides to bring with him to New Orleans for media days matters. Like, he doesn't make that decision lightly from what I've been able to tell. He doesn't just bring the quarterback like a lot of teams do. As a matter of fact, it's been a long time since he did bring the quarterback. So judging that Skipper was selected for that, kind of earned that opportunity, I would imagine it means Skipper's taken a big step forward in the leadership role, which is what they really need.
Well, Dawson, if you had to pick a defensive player to have a breakout type season in 2025, who would that be?
Yeah, so I'll go with a guy I haven't mentioned yet, and I think y'all alluded to him once. He's one of the most confusing players I've ever watched. It's Jaden Duggar. I still don't know what position he plays. I don't know if the UL coaches know what position he plays either. They've lined him up on the edge to rush the passer. They've put him in a drop back situation at linebacker. He's even taken some reps at safety. Like, he's just a freak athlete, and it felt like last year they never quite figured out what button to press with him. They kind of admitted it, later in the postseason practices, and then again in the spring, like they talked about it, like, we got to figure out where Duggar's going to be. I don't know. Maybe the linebacker room, because of kind of some of the losses they had, maybe they end up playing him more snaps at linebacker than anything else. But he's big enough and lean enough to get on the edge and rush the passer, yet fast enough to like cover receivers. So it's a really weird but also awesome skill set. So I'll pick him as the breakout just because my hope is that they figure. I don't know if I was a defense coordinator, I have no idea what to do with him, but I'm hoping that the guys who get paid more than me can figure it out.
Well, we've talked offense, we've talked defense. Now let's move over to the special teams. How are those units looking, and are there any concerns?
Yeah, there's big concerns, actually. They had the best kicker in the country last year, Kenny Almendarez. He won the Lou Groza Award. He's also like the funniest, most down-to-earth, awesome dude you'll ever meet, so I wanted to throw that in there. But they didn't really have to think about it once they crossed midfield last year. Like, all right, we've got 3. Let's see if we can get 7. They do not have that. Again, kind of trying to read between the lines. When Coach Des was asked about it in the spring, he didn't seem settled. Like, it didn't seem like he's not worried about it, right? So they've got Tony Sterner is back. They've got Logan Klotz, who's been around for a while. Sounds like a full-blown kicker battle. The kicker position is a big question mark. Punter, they've got their punter back. They should be okay there. It wasn't great for him last year, but it was good enough. Kicker, though, is really a question mark.
Well, now that spring practice is over, which position group or groups do you think is the most concerning heading into the season?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go away from kicker, but just know I'm thinking about it. Kicker could be up there. I think big picture, I'll go back to the linebackers just because, and I kind of was thinking my way through this the other day. The defensive line, I felt like struggled down the stretch last year. When they got into some issues, it was a lot of the defensive line stuff. Well, maybe they shored that up, and maybe it did get better, but your linebackers also are no longer there. So maybe you do get better in the defensive line, and it still might not matter if the linebacking group that you have stepping up isn't, close to what they were last year, enough to at least kind of hide some of those issues. I feel probably the best about the secondary on the defense, and then offensively, I could choose the quarterback room just because we haven't seen them, but at least the talent level feels like it's going to be okay there. And like I said before, hopefully they're not going to ask as much. Receiver and linebacker would be the last two, but I'd go linebacker. Like, I just wonder if even if you did fix the D line to a point where it's really productive, like, do you have enough in that room to get by?
In today's age of NIL, revenue sharing, and the transfer portal, how have you seen that change Louisiana's recruiting philosophy?
Yeah, they've done a really unique thing. And I've been really impressed by it. And Coach Decimo is pretty transparent. I think more so than some coaches. They want to recruit high school kids, and they've always wanted to. And, he came out the first, after this first started happening, when he took the job, and he was like, we're going to recruit high school kids. We're going to do it differently. Basically kind of like the Dabo Sweeney approach, right? Like, we're just not going to use the portal that much. Then he came back, and they used it. The only time they'd really use it is if they had a real need after spring, like they'd maybe go out and grab a grad transfer or two. Then he came back, and it sounded to me last year like he had kind of reevaluated where they were at. And they still do focus on developing high school talent. They've done a really good job retaining most of it. Like they've lost a handful of guys, but since Dez has been here, like they've done a pretty good job keeping a lot of their guys. But they've used the portal in a little bit more creative way. They've gone out and gotten a couple of younger players out of the portal, not just like a plug and play grad transfer. They went out and got Trey Fight from Arizona State last year. It was like an underclassman. So I think there's been an acknowledgement that you just have to use it. And obviously now, Walker Howard, that was also a really unique situation because like Walker's from Lafayette. He wanted to get back home. His family's really involved in the community, stuff like that. But still went out and got a big high profile quarterback in the portal. So I think there's been an acknowledgement that it has to be used a little bit more, but at its core and at Coach Dez's core, he wants to recruit and develop high school players. And so that's still going to be the bulk of what the Cajuns do from a football standpoint.
Well, you got this hotbed of recruits there in Louisiana, and we often see these P4 teams like come click. Hey, if you're a first team all conference, you're gone. You're going somewhere else. Have you seen Louisiana have access to higher level recruits, especially there around Louisiana?
Yes and no. It's been the interesting thing is I think they've actually had more success on getting the guys who go off for a year and then realize maybe I don't have as much opportunity as I wanted to, and then they come back. Like that's what happened with Fitzgerald West at the defensive tackle spot, who was from the area, went to LSU, didn't really play much, comes back to UL. Shelton Sampson now is the same story. Walker Howard now is potentially the same story. So like they're still, they're not going out and getting the five. There was a 5-star at Acadiana High 2 years ago. Like he went to LSU. That's still going to happen. But they've done this thing where they'll go, hey, it's okay. Like you didn't take us the first time. You could take us the second time around. And that's kind of worked for them too. Like Tyrone Lewis, who we talked about earlier, was a guy who was at Kansas State early in his career, just didn't quite get the chance, comes to UL, plays, breaks out, ends up going on and having a shot to play some pro ball. Like that's been more of the high school players that they've recruited, I think, have still been the same caliber, but they have had some access to some like former 4 or 5-star recruits that are now on their second opportunity, if that makes sense.
What do you think the main strength of this 2025 team is?
They've really had they talk about the culture and stuff. I think it really means something down here. They've retained now a large portion of the coaching staff for the second consecutive season. So, that's massive for them. Like one of the biggest problems when Billy Napier left, like everybody jokes, like he took everything except the kitchen sink because he brought all the assistant coaches, like he brought the video guy. So they really like Coach Dez was building this staff almost from scratch. Now he's got a staff that he's been comfortable with. So I think the continuity in the coaching room, when you have players coming and going, can you have some consistent messaging, right? And I think that's what they do have. As far as like an actual on the football field answer for you, I think it has to be the running game. Like they've got enough experience on the offensive line. They've got 2 really talented backs and a couple others. The freshman Darrell Davis I didn't even mention earlier, who they really feel, or Darrell Smith, I should say, that they feel good about. So they're going to have to run the football really, really well this year. But yeah, overall, man, I think it's that continuity in the coaching staff. That could be a big advantage for them.
Well, Dawson, you talked about the coaching staff and the continuity there. And the team was just in the Sun Belt Championship last year. Now we've got all these question marks and different pieces here and there. What does success look like for the Ragin Cajuns in 2025?
Yeah, well, first things first, they're going to open a new stadium, and that's really, really important for the community. Like last year, ironically enough, they have one of their best seasons in a while, and it's in a half-built stadium. They host a championship game in that same half-built stadium. I've been by the new one. It looks awesome. It's almost ready to go. It's going to open. So that's really big, is to get off to a hot start. They play Rice in the opener. Like, Rice is not going to get picked to win the American or anything like that. So that's a game that they're going to have to you'd really love to get off to a hot start and beat Rice, right? Then you play McNeese, who's an in-state rival at the FCS level the next week, also at home. So like those 2 games are really, really important for them to get some momentum behind the program and the fan base and everybody going to the new stadium and enjoying it. Past that, I think, look, they expect to compete for Sun Belt championships every year. They got back on top of the West last year, still got divisions, right? So you take a look around. a lot of question marks, but a lot of teams that could challenge them. I don't think there's any games that you're going to feel good about writing a W next to when you look at the schedule really all the way through in the Sun Belt Conference. But they're going to get picked first, second, or third, I'd imagine, in the West. So, success looks like competing for the conference championship.
And you talked about that schedule. Is there a part of that schedule that you are like, all right, hey, if we're going to compete for a championship, this is the part of the schedule that we really got to dominate, or we can't have an off week here?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, they do have the bye game at Missouri, but it's a non-conference game. They'll get forgiven for that one. There is a stretch, though. They're going to go to JMU. It'll be their first trip, actually, to play the Dukes. I imagine JMU is going to be the favorite or close to it on the eastern side. They come back home after that, and they play Southern Miss, who now has the head coach who was at Marshall, who Cajun fans are going to get quite familiar with. I imagine that rivalry is only going to grow. That's a really important part of the schedule. It's early in conference play too. Like, it's not down the stretch. It's not going to be once you kind of know what's at stake. You go at JMU, you come back home to host Southern Miss. Like, that's two really, really big ones. And so I think we'll know kind of early in the Sun Belt slate, like, all right, is this team ready to compete, or do they kind of get checked early? That's going to be big to find out.
Well, Dawson, we've covered a lot of ground today, but is there anything else you want to share or think that we should know about this 2025 Louisiana Ragin Cajuns football team?
No, man, I'm excited about them. There haven't been, a combination of this many question marks along with this many expectations in a long time. Billy Napier's last year was a year where literally everybody came back because it was COVID year and the season didn't get finished. And so, like, the entire team was back, like Levi Lewis at quarterback and all of his friends. So that team had massive expectations, but we also basically knew who was going to play everywhere. We've never even seen this quarterback take a snap, and yet the expectations are still high. So that's unique, and I think that'll be fun to watch it play out. But no, man, I'm ready to go. It's July 8th as we're taping this. I wish it was August 8th because it'd be closer to football season, man.
All right, Dawson. Well, thank you very much for taking some time out of your day to spend with us and share your knowledge. We greatly appreciate it. And before we let you go, is there anything, that where can people find your work?
Yeah, no doubt. First off, thank you guys for having me. Appreciate what you guys are doing. I love the group of five. I know it gets, some people don't want you to use that terminology these days, but I think it's still cool. So thank you for having me. My show, weekdays 1 to 3 p.m. on ESPN 103.7 in Lafayette, 104.1 in Lake Charles. We got a mobile app. You can stream it anywhere you are. And then, you'll hear me on some Cajuns broadcasts throughout the year. But on Twitter, I've got a couple podcasts and things like that. They're all basically posted on my account. So at Eiserloh Dawson. But no, this was fun. Appreciate y'all for having me.
But we appreciate you being here. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 High.
Fight on, Cajuns, fight on to victory for the red and white. We will sing a triumphant glory for our team tonight. You will hear the razor of the Cajuns, so let's give a yell. Hey! Hustle up and bustle up and fight on victory. Go! U-L! Yeah!